a lot of stuff to cover here from our friends over at Mountains to Metal. Now, we have a few different pieces here from them for the Broncos. We installed their skid plates here for the lower control arms. We installed their support bracket there for the rear tailgate. We also installed 2 MOLLE grid pads there on inside of the rear quarter windows, and we also installed their spare tire strapped MOLLE pad. What's going on, Team Lethal fans? It's Joe here with Lethal Performance. Today, as you can see, we've got a lot of stuff to cover here from our friends over at Mountains to Metal. Now, we have a few different pieces here from them for the Broncos. However, they specialize in outdoor equipment for various other vehicles, including the F-150, the Ranger, and a couple other different makes and models. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into what we've got sitting out here on the table. Now, before we dive into specifics here, let's go ahead and talk about Mountains to Metal themselves. They're based here in Wilson, North Carolina, and they manufacture and fabricate everything in-house in America. So you know you're going to be getting some of the highest quality components that you can possibly get for your vehicle. Now, more recently, they've gotten real heavy into the Bronco aftermarket with a few different popular accessory kits that I actually have here out in front of me. So let's go ahead and break down these individual kits and show you guys some of the more popular stuff that they offer. Let's go ahead and kick things off with their flip down attic shelf. Now, this shelf is an easy bolt-on accessory that is compatible with all 4-door Broncos with the threaded bolt hole on the rear roll bar. Now, if your Bronco doesn't have a threaded rear roll bar, then there are a few other solutions that you can do to get this installed. However, it doesn't make it a complete bolt-on assembly, and Mountains to Metal is currently working on a solution for you guys. This kit will work on the Raptors once you remove that cross brace that's on the rear roll bar. Now, these shelves do come in 2 different configurations, and that all depends on what you have set up for rear speakers. If you have the stock speakers, they have that option, and if you have larger aftermarket speakers, they do have a specialized attic shelf for it. The shelf itself is made from 14 gauge steel and is powder coated black to give it a nice quality touch in the Bronco's interior. The hardware that comes with the kit, as well as the South Code latches themselves, will make you realize that this is no joke of a kit. This is some high quality made in the USA stuff, and it should go really nicely in our Bronco. This attic shelf fills up a dead space in the Bronco's interior and gives you a versatile accessory for various different uses, mostly storage. Next thing we have here is their Tailgate Reinforcement Bracket. Now, this is going to be a must-have for you guys who have a larger wheel and tire combination hanging on the back of that tailgate, or you have some extra recovery equipment that's hanging on the back of that door there. Either way, the more weight you add to that tailgate door, the more wear and tear that you're going to see on the hinge assembly, and then of course is going to lead to a premature failure down the road. Now, with this bracket installed, you're going to see a decrease in that wear and tear, and of course a bit of longevity in your door, as well as some added strength and rigidity to the door itself for those of you who haven't yet added on all those accessories and will in the future. Now, this kit here comes with all stainless steel hardware, CNC machined aluminum spacers, and it comes with a gasket on the underside here to make sure that it doesn't have metal to metal rubbing from your door to this bracket. Now, the bracket itself is made from 3/16 inch thick steel and is powder coated in a nice black finish, so it's not only going to be super strong, but it's going to be protected and look pretty from anything that comes its way. Next thing we have is their lower control arm skid plates. Now, these are essentially designed to bolt onto the bottom of your front lower control arms on each side of the suspension and are designed to help protect them from anything that may come their way during a trail ride. Now, not only is this going to help keep your lower control arm out of harm's way, it's also going to help keep your lower shock mount that's bolted into the lower control arm safe from anything else as well. Mountains to Metal has done a really cool thing here with these kits and has provided them with the stainless steel what they call keep-offs. Now, what these keep-offs do is essentially keep the head of the bolt safe by keeping it in this little hollowed out shell here. Now, this shell is extremely strong and will not let the head of those bolts get damaged under any circumstance. So in the situation where you do need to remove the skid plates, either to replace them or to do some repairs on something, the bolts will come off just as easy as they went on because the head of the bolt is still going to be there and it's not going to get damaged by anything that comes its way. And just like everything else, Mountains to Metal Metal has given us. It's finished in that nice black powder coating, so it'll look nice underneath the underside of the truck. And lastly, we have their MOLLE panels, which they have made for a few various locations around the inside and outside of the Bronco. More specifically, in front of me here though, we have their rear tire MOLLE panel and we have their rear roll bar MOLLE panels. Now for those of you who don't know what the purpose of these MOLLE gridded design is essentially the versatility of it. You can use it to mount stuff to or to strap stuff down to. It's just a super versatile and useful grid pattern that you can use for a wide variety of different things that your creative mind could possibly think of. Now the beauty of the MOLLE is that it gives you allotment to strap stuff to it. Basically you can strap hardware, clothes, tools, anything your mind can possibly think of that isn't insanely heavy, but just enough to the point to where it'll support it. It is made out of steel, a 12 gauge steel to be exact, so you are going to be able to get quite a bit of weight on these racks here without having a failure or having them bend out. So with that being said, it gives you quite a bit of creativity to do stuff with, and they don't require the roof to be on the Bronco to use them. So now that we've overviewed all of these popular pieces from Mountains to Metal, let's go ahead and get them installed on Christy's Bronco. Alrighty guys, so now that we're out here with the Bronco, we can go ahead and start installing all the parts that we have here from Mountains to Metal. We're gonna go ahead and start off with their tailgate reinforcement bracket here because it is arguably the hardest one to install and it's also going to be the most time consuming out of everything here. So let's go ahead and get started with that. You're gonna need a couple tools, but not too many for this install. For starters, you're gonna need a 13mm socket and an extension with a ratchet. Then you're gonna need a 6mm Allen key. You're also gonna need a T47 bit. It's also going to be helpful to have some plastic pry tools, and since we are going to be taking this door loose from its mount, we are going to definitely need some cardboard or some towels to essentially let the door sit on the bumper with while we install the bracket. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started by taking off the spare tire. Heavy boy. Next thing we want to do is open up the tailgate and disconnect the harness for the third brake light and for the camera here. That can be done through this little access panel here, which we're going to go ahead and remove with some plastic pry tools. Now with these two harnesses disconnected, we can go ahead and shove out this plug here. Then shove the wires out of the hole. Now that we've got the harness all disconnected and out of the way, we can go ahead and remove the spare tire carrier using a 13mm socket and an extension. Now it is noted in the instruction that these bolts will actually not be reused on the install of the bracket. Just be careful on this last bolt here that you want to make sure to hold the bracket in place so it doesn't fall. Okay, now that's out of the way. Now after we got that carrier assembly off, the next thing you need to do is prep for the door to be removed from its hinges here. So that's gonna go ahead and require what Mountains to Metal prefers is taking some cardboard and shoving it under in between the bumper and the door here. It's completely your choice. However, we're gonna go ahead and use what Mountains to Metal tends to believe to work the best. We're also going to use some towels in here to make sure that the cardboard does not scratch the bottom of the door and it is well secured down there below. So now that we have our cardboard stuffed nicely into the gaps of the door to hopefully kind of help it keep it within the same place, we can go ahead and start removing these 4 T47 bolts. So now that we got all 4 bolts out, we can start installing the new bracket here. Now with this, the first thing that we're gonna have to do is install these spacers here onto the door itself that are going to fit in that groove like so, just to help take up some of that space and keep it off of the paint of the bracket. Obviously you kind of can't get your fingers in there to hold it in place while you're putting the bracket on, so the easiest way that Mountains to Metal has found is to use a piece of masking tape just to hold it in place. You want to use a pretty decently sized piece of masking tape because you want to be able to get a full nice pull on it when you go to grab it off, and you want to make sure that it's not pinched in between the bolt and the door itself. Once those spacers are in place, you can go ahead and start mounting the bracket to the door and get one of your bolts in. So now once we have this all reassembled back together, you can go ahead and remove your cardboard shims and of course reinstall the harness and finish up everything else. So now with this completely installed, you just want to double check to make sure that the door is fitting correctly and you don't have to do any more adjustments there. Make sure it opens all the way without hitting. There's no hitting. Everything looks good there. Let's go ahead and close it. Make sure it hits the striker correctly. That feels really good. Now the next thing we're going to be installing is going to be the rear window MOLLE panels. Now these here are only going to need a couple of tools. You're going to need a T45 Torx bit. You're going to also need, possibly if you have a soft top Bronco, you're going to need a 13mm socket, and then of course you're going to need a 4mm Allen key. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to go ahead and start with the passenger side here, and the first thing you have to do is remove this panel. It should just pry back like so, by hand. And one final clip here in the middle. Bam, that's off. Now once we have that plastic panel off here, you can see it gives us access to these bolt holes. Since we have the hardtop model here, we're gonna go ahead and install the supplied bolts with the supplied bracket. Now there are two different versions of the bolts, whether you have a hardtop or a soft top, so you wanna make sure that you select the right bolts for it, which are going to be the longer bolts listed in the install instructions as H. You just want to make sure to install the shorter end on the side that hits the truck. You're going to use a 13mm socket. Once that bracket's installed, you can go ahead and reinstall the plastic piece. Next, you're going to want to install this small bracket here onto where the threads are for the roll bar. This is also a 13mm. You want to make sure that this bracket here is facing out toward the interior of the Bronco. Next thing here, you're going to want to remove this little plastic cover for the seatbelt bolt. Using a T47 bit, you're going to want to go ahead and remove the seatbelt. Once you have the bracket installed like this, you can go ahead and spin on that clip. Once you get the seat belt back into its place and tightened down, you just want to make sure that the bracket is facing out toward the back of the truck. Next thing we can do is install these brackets here in place on these mounts here. These are going to take those 4mm Allen key bolts. Once we have all those brackets installed, we can go ahead and install the actual MOLLE grid now. Now with this side installed, we can go ahead and move over to the driver's side. So now we've got everything pretty much installed on the interior side of the Bronco, except for that flip down attic shelf, because we don't have the necessary threads on the roll bar itself. So until they come up with a solution with that, we won't be installing that piece, but now we can go ahead and move on to the stuff that goes on the outside, including their spare tire MOLLE strap bracket and their front lower control arm skid pad. Since we're already at the back, let's go ahead and just get that out of the way. course, follow your tire around. As if that wasn't easy enough, we're already done. So now moving on to the front, we have these skid plates here for the bottom control arms. Everything should go forward here. Pretty straightforward, nothing too crazy. You are gonna need a 19mm socket or wrench, a 13mm, and a 5mm Allen key. So let's go ahead and get this party started. So the first thing you're gonna wanna do is snake up this bracket here, which is going to rest on top of the control arm. Now that you have that in place, we can go ahead and take these two nuts off here, just being cautious that this is attached to the strut here and we don't want to get that any out of shape. Now, since it does have the weight of the vehicle on it, we shouldn't have any issues with the strut coming out of place. Once those nuts are off from those bolts, you can go ahead and start to get your plate up there.
But I tell you, if you're doing all
Once you have those two shock mount bolts back into place and bolt tightened down, we can go ahead and move up to the top mounts here. All right, we're all done with this side now. We can go ahead and move on to the driver's side. That's gonna do it for us, guys. That is the Mountains to Metal accessories here that we installed on Christy's Bronco. As you can see, the install was really straightforward, not too bad at all, and all the instructions were really clear, made it really super easy to get all these accessories installed. Based on what we did, we installed their skid plates here for the lower control arms. We installed their support bracket there for the rear tailgate. We also installed two MOLLE grid pads there on inside of the rear quarter windows, and we also installed their spare tire strapped MOLLE pad. If you guys have any questions about the Mountain to Metal line of products that we sell here at Lethal Performance for the Bronco and various other vehicles, feel free to reach out to us in the comments below or by phone at 561-753-8105. This has been Joe with Lethal Performance, and I'm out of here.
on that motor when it's hanging out, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Oh, you're recording.
I am.
Oh, it's alright. That wasn't Lethal Smalls. Ugh, don't worry. I'm closer to the ground, I got you.
Shh, I didn't say that.
Oh. Now, warehouse workers flinging off language. Woo woo! Well, her truck smells nice.
Yeah.
Wasn't this one that smelled like fish or something?
Oh yeah, no, this one smelled awful.
It smells much better.
Yes, very much.